G'day everybody, welcome to the panel where we look at the world through the frame of the comic book. My name is Jason Badower, I'm a writer and artist for DC Comics. I'm currently working on DC Comics Black Label, Joker Harley, Criminal Sanity, Volume 2. Check out Volume number 1, local comic book store. I am joined today by my buddy in crime and Marvel Living Library, Scott Stuart. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, mate. Doing really well. Looking forward to talking about the summer's biggest movie. Your summer's, anyway.
Scott, what would you say for a spoiler-free review of Deadpool and Wolverine?
Batman's not in it. I had a really good time with it. I'm torn as to whether it really works for general audiences who aren't up on the many references it makes along the way. It's a movie that was made seemingly specifically for me in terms of its density of comic book references.
If you are a Wolverine fan, I really think you will love this movie. It is absolutely peak comic book adaptation of Wolverine. I think it is also Deadpool at his most unannoying. This is Marvel absolutely doing Deadpool and finding a really interesting cruising altitude where if you've watched my Deadpool 1 review, you will know that I was not a huge fan of Deadpool. If you are turned off Deadpool, I think you'd be fine with this movie, actually.
Can get behind that. It's definitely a Deadpool turns down to 7, even though the meta elements are turned up to 11.
If you have any sort of sacred cows that you are very beholden to, you better let that go at the door. Just go in and go have fun. Scott, how would you rate this in terms of the other two Deadpool movies? How would you rank them?
That's a really interesting question that I've been wrestling with since I saw the movie. I tend to think at the moment it's probably third of 3 by a small margin.
Really? I would go Deadpool 1, then Deadpool and Wolverine, and then Deadpool 2. I liked it way more than Deadpool 2, actually, and I would only put Deadpool 1 slightly higher because I just think for general audiences, it is a better film. Deadpool and Wolverine is absolutely peak comic book. What about in ranking this as a Wolverine movie? Where would you rank it for Wolverine fans?
That is a much harder question. Definitely below Logan. That's S tier Wolverine. It'd come close after that because the Wolverine solo movies have their flaws. And the X-Men movies also have their flaws, and in some cases have dated themselves a bit. Shocking what happens in a quarter of a century.
Your top 3 were Logan, X1, and Deadpool 1 in almost no particular order, depending on the day of the week and the time of the year. Where would you put X1 in relation to this movie? So Logan, this movie, and X1, let's say.
It's a lot like comparing apples with fireworks. It's trying to do such a different thing. It's hard to put them side by side and evaluate them on that basis. The scope of this movie is very impressive. Its loyalty and irreverence to the source materials it references off the charts. So it's doing 2 very different things. If you want a straight superhero movie, I'd lean you at X1. But I think just for a rollicking good time, this might come out slightly ahead.
I still rank X1 just slightly above it for the pure fact that it had to beat down the grass for everybody else. It had to clear the trees so everybody else could go faster, further, higher and faster. And this film absolutely does that. But having watched X1 again recently, I still think it is an absolutely remarkable film. This, though, to your point, is way more fun. This is absolutely popcorn summer blockbuster. We are about to rank Deadpool and Wolverine against every other MCU film, but just a quick PSA, my YouTubing friend. If you are digging what we're doing, please hit the like button. For a beginning channel, every like is gold to us. It's like supporting a small business that doesn't cost you a cent. And join us by clicking the subscribe for our scene-by-scene breakdown of Deadpool and Wolverine. Okay, back to the chat. Okay, so this is Scott's on my list of almost every MCU movie so far. We are missing Quantumania and the Marvels. We just haven't got around to rating those, but this pretty much has everything else here. Scott, did you want to go first?
I think it would fall somewhere at the bottom end of the top third, so around the Black Panther, Ant-Man area in the rankings as I had them at the time. I think Black Panther is a better and more important film and a film that's going to have a longer legacy. But in terms of simply enjoying it, I'm going to put it above Black Panther. My concern about ranking Deadpool Wolverine is that it's so new. All of these other movies up at the top 2/3, if not further down on my list, I consider eminently rewatchable, eminently enjoyable on the 3rd, 4th, 5th viewing. I don't know how Deadpool Wolverine will go, having watched it for the 3rd or 4th time yet. That's the only asterisk I'd put against my current placement.
Nice. That's a big call. That puts it about in 8th place for Scott. 8 out of 27 films. That is absolutely in the upper third. That is a big rating there. For me, I'm not much further below it. I ended up putting it 13th place, just after Captain America Civil War. But here's the thing, when you look at my list from number 7 all the way to 18, and remember this comes in at 13, almost smack bang in the middle of the list, from 7 to 18, all those films there, Avengers Infinity War, Thor Ragnarok, Thor, Black Panther, Winter Soldier, Civil War, Deadpool Wolverine, Guardians Volume 2, Ant-Man, Spider-Man No Way Home, Spider-Man Far From Home. Difference between them is 0.000 for me. Like, they are all just a giant clump that I would watch again and again, and I think they're all just incredibly fun, and Deadpool Wolverine sits right in the middle of those for me. So in terms of rating it, while I rank those, they're all the same to me. They're pretty much interchangeable. One of the things that I want to do in the future is to tier rank all the good X-Men movies and Deadpool movies and put them in here too. I would love to see you rate Logan somewhere on this list. That would be really exciting for me to see. I've seen it a couple times now, and I just think it's very watchable for me, a very palatable Deadpool, and what I think is the absolutely truest comic to screen adaptation of Wolverine for me. And for those two reasons, if either of those things intrigue you, absolutely recommend Deadpool Wolverine.
They did a good job bringing some elements of Wolverine's character that haven't been well explored previously to the screen. In such a crowded movie, the large writing team should be commended for that.
The writers absolutely did an incredible job. Rhett Reese, Paul Wernick, Ryan Reynolds, Zeb Wells, and Sean Levy. You have read a lot more Zeb Wells comics than I have. What did you feel, any of Zeb Wells' fingerprints coming through, or what do you think that his contribution might have been?
Whereas I'm familiar with Zeb Wells from comics, most people watching us talk about this are probably familiar with Zeb Wells as one of the writers on Robot Chicken. And I think that is just as much an antecedent to this movie, the Deadpool and X-Men and Wolverine movies are, in that it is completely the source material to what came before. But that irreverence comes from a place of love and genuine affection. And that's really important if you're going to do this sort of thing. There is definitely scope for a savage disdain satire of what superheroes are. Cough, cough, Garth Ennis' The Boys. It always lands better.
The TV show, by the way, the TV show is a very different creature to the graphic novel. But go on.
But that affection for the material is what gives it license to rib it as much as it does. And to not disrespect the affection that anybody might have for this material. We're recording this and the movie came out in 2024. 16 years of the MCU. And that's, for somebody who saw Iron Man at 10, that's a lifetime of maturing, perspective changing, and no matter how much you love it, there does come a time where you've got to acknowledge its flaws and foibles. And it not only helps you appreciate the original material, but gives you scope to imagine it doing something else. It's almost like the adolescence of the MCU, and it's a necessary step along the way.
I feel it's beyond an adolescence of the MCU. I know you say it's 16, but it feels like it's older than that. I guess because when you presume that the people that were old enough to go watch these movies for the first time could have been anywhere upwards of 8 onwards and now going to be minimum 24, you could see why this movie's R-rated also, because almost the entire audience that will appreciate everything that is going on in this movie does need to be of that age, does need to have ingested all these movies and media. Holy cow, Robot Chicken is absolutely why they hired him for this, as well as having written several hundred Marvel comics.
Zeb Wells is prolific and very talented. I've greatly enjoyed his amazing Spider-Man run up to the point that I'm at, which for the record is just before Gang War starts. He gets why superheroes work, and that's why he's so good at lampooning them. And as I said before, you need genuine affection for the material to be able to lampoon it in a loving way and not a spiteful way.
That's really the key thing with this. I felt so much of Deadpool 1 especially was very spiteful, all of Wade's comments. But I found this was something genuinely loving and not just self-aware, but aware too. Very much a reverence for the material. And I think by him having that love for the MCU enabled that to come through in all his comments. All right, let's get into some spoiler territory. We're going to explain the film. We're going to do one of our classic deep dives. We're going to go from the start of the film as far through as we have the fortitude to manage, because there is so much to talk about.
Maximum effort.
We're not going to litigate every little Easter egg in there. You can go hunt that stuff for yourself. We want to dig into the big, deeper meanings, the deeper dive into this movie. Let's go the spoiler review, Scott. Now talk about all the spoilers and everything. What did you think of the movie?
I totally bit on the Chris Evans reveal. I was mouthing Avengers Assemble when he said flame on. I loved that so much. That was the best bait and switch.
One of the things I love about going to see movies with American audiences is how vocal they are when a movie has huge highs. And that moment when Chris Evans revealed himself, the pop was fantastic. And then when he yells flame on, just the gut laughing from everybody was also fantastic. I loved it. In fact, Scott, you change your backdrop.
I put this up earlier to tease Jace for our spoiler-free review. And
I ixnayed, killed it.
Because this would definitely be a spoiler. The cameos, the supporting cast in this movie is all spoilers, and it's a joy, an absolute joy to see some of these characters again portrayed by the original actors. Shout out to Wesley Snipes, still looking awesome, even though there's definitely some grey in that beard now. Jennifer Garner reprising her role as Elektra. Channing Tatum playing a rumoured production of Gambit was inspired, and he's a pretty underrated comedic actor in my book.
Not seen the 21 and 22 Jump Streets. He is absolutely hilarious in those movies. And there is even a line that he drops where everyone's, I want to get out of the void. And I think I was born in the void. Referencing his movie was never made.
The entire plot of the movie is about the death of franchises and the death of universes and corporate IP management, which is insanely meta. And given that framework, to add some emotional beats for Wolverine especially, I think, the writing team did a fantastic job.
From the moment I saw the 20th Century Fox logo was the moment that I realized this movie was about saying goodbye to the 20th Century Fox franchise and being able to pick and choose like a buffet of which bits are going to be taken forward into the future. And it was very much that, as you said, IP management. I think that the conversation with Happy Hogan is the core driving motivator and axis for Deadpool in this entire movie. One of the things he says at the start is, don't aim so high, just aim for the middle and you'll always be happy. I do wonder if you think that is a backhanded comment at the whole Fox ensemble.
I think a much less charitable interpretation would be it's a commentary on this film itself, but I tend to think yes. It was aimed at the Fox franchise, which I would argue is pretty middling in its own ambitions, and without the creativity and fun that makes this much more enjoyable for general audiences.
One of our big concerns with Deadpool is that the problem with the character and bringing him into the MCU is that all the character does is look backwards. Now, I was worried that I was going to be just inundated with a whole bunch of jokes that just pull Peter and any of the other characters that he runs into backwards, or holding them up or comparing them to the original trinity of Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. But this also made Deadpool the perfect tool to look back over the Fox franchise. And so I felt that as a storytelling device, he was absolutely perfect for the role. What a great device, in the way that they tuned him to fit into this movie. How did you find his fourth wall bantering?
The whole plot is a fourth wall break, in a way. And so there was less need for the character to take him and the audience aside, which I think was a very smart decision, because when you're already very concerned with crass things such as IP management and the place of middling franchises in a new world, you don't want to run that risk of taking the audience out of the movie.
Very much found him a lot closer to our original preferences, to be more Ferris Bueller, or in this case, I actually found that he was like very much Mystery Science Theater 3000, being the audience's voice in our head, like your buddy sitting next to you making the snarkiest comment that could ever be found on YouTube in every single scene. And there was something about it that added to the narrative for me when he was able to fold things through the fourth wall, but also make it somehow relevant to what was going on. And the idea too that everyone just treats it as him having some sort of break with reality. And even then, most of the time, it was very subtle, because he'd just drop it while he was talking to people, like referencing pop culture that only him and us are privy to. And again, as I said in my Deadpool review, that it's like he had a multiversal break with reality when he went through that trauma with Francis, but also gave him his powers. And I found him really fun, enjoyable. Those few times where he headbutts the camera and it's just, screw you, Fox, I'm going to Disneyland. It's just absolutely fantastic. It just really worked for me.
I also appreciate that they resisted the temptation to give Wolverine any lines that did that as well. It's very much a buddy comedy at its core. They kept Wolverine's character intact and didn't even have him comment on the weird things Wade would say. And I thought that was to the movie service.
The next episode, we're going to focus on the worst Wolverine ever, which is, for me, the title of the character rather than the actual character, because I think he's probably one of the best Wolverines ever, and I really enjoyed him. But today I really want to talk about Wade Wilson because I found him so fascinating. I've just come off editing 2 Deadpool videos, so I'm way into the Wade Wilson. But one of the things I want to dial back, Scott, and that is, can you think of a watch list of all the movies that this references?
Yes, the original Fantastic Four movie. Probably don't need to do Rise of the Silver Surfer. X-Men 1, 2, and 3, I think all get nods. Daredevil, I guess you could refer to Wolverine Origins. Loki, at least season 1, I think. How little they put in any exposition about Alioth and the Limbo universe really surprised me. I imagine there's a test audience who sat through an exposition scene and another test audience who didn't, and they didn't much care either way, so they just cut it out. Because I can't imagine they weren't worried about that during production. You have to have seen Logan, or at least be very familiar with what it's about and its final scene.
Absolutely have to have seen Logan. We'll put that almost on near the top of the list.
Definitely one of the Blade movies.
I actually think you need to see Blade 3 because Blade says something along the lines of, I hate you, and he goes, you always have. And I'm pretty sure it's referring to his portrayal as Hannibal King in Blade 3.
I believe you've for once got the name right. Congratulations.
Miracles do happen. It's a Christmas miracle. I almost said Hannibal Lecter.
I don't think you need to sit through Elektra, given the characters in Daredevil. If you're going to watch Daredevil, find a director's cut, is my advice. Oh, we have Deadpool 1 and 2, obviously. There's got to be more in there, but yeah, off one viewing a couple of days ago, off the top of my head, that's a pretty good list.
I think it's a really good list. The only ones I can think of is when Gambit reels off the 3 people who went up against Cassandra Nova and died. Maybe the Quicksilver, the Punisher, and the Daredevil, as you've already mentioned.
Yes, the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, because the Russian is in the Team-O bad guys. So yes, definitely the Thomas Jane Punisher movie.
How sad are you that they didn't get big sexy Kevin Nash back for that?
I imagine he wanted to get paid. He saw Disney come up on his caller ID and the dollar signs revolved around his eyes. Either that or he'd already had a job somewhere else. There are a couple of recasts in the cameos. They definitely had a different actor for Juggernaut. Vinnie Jones apparently didn't want to come back and have to be put into the helmet again. But for the most part, they go and get the originals, dust them off, apply some really thick makeup, and my lord, was it all a grand surprise.
Do you think that was Psylocke too? That Laura, when she leaps up to Cassandra Nova's headquarters? Because she had the pink energy that was very similar, and she had all the torn clothing, but it was not resembling of anything else. But she was the only one of the sort of plebs that were hanging around Cassandra Nova's Furiosa Ant-Man graveyard that had any powers. And so it just makes me think that she maybe might have been Psylocke. So I'll tentatively put X-Men Apocalypse on the list, if you think.
I thought that movie didn't exist. It must have been a wholly original character for some reason.
I still have very powerful memories of Olivia Munn that I don't think any sort of continuity washing again is going to get rid of.
I will admit that seeing Olivia Munn in the Psylocke costume was a happy reminder of certain Jim Lee illustrations.
And the only other thing I can think to add to that is the 2005 Hall H announcement of Gambit in the X-Men, if you really want to see the closest he ever got to being put on film.
Did they make a side joke about the fact that they announced Mahershala Ali as a new Blade 5 years ago and we still haven't heard hide nor hair of that going into production?
I think that the closest they got was when Wesley Snipes was like, and there's only going to be one Blade. And Deadpool just looks it up. He was an excellent Blade. If you have not seen the first Blade of all the movies on this list, I would put that somewhere near the top. Scott, many moons ago in the Scott and Jay's Not So Cinematic Universe, referenced it as probably the start of the superhero genre. I considered it less superhero-y because of the vampire tropes in it. If you were to be absolutely true, hand to God, like, you'd be like, yeah, maybe I think Blade is where this all really starts.
Deadpool Wolverine and Wesley Snipes' inclusion in this movie absolutely validates my earlier and probably on the internet for posterity's take that, yeah, the Marvel multiverse really kicked off with Blade in 1998 rather than X-Men in 99.
I want to get to some of the deeper issues of the movie and what the movie is about. Any thoughts on that, Scott? Like for you, again, you've only seen it once, so I know it's very hard to soak all this sort of stuff in, but if you had to pull any takeaways?
Oh, look, if I wanted to distill the themes into a single word, it would be loss or grief. Wade's fighting against losing his entire universe. Wolverine's dealing with his world crumbling around him. All the other characters are dealing with the fact that their universe is now a postscript that's about to be overwritten with a new history. Or in Gambit's case, a history that never was written in the first place. Legacy, loss, and moving forward in the face of these things.
That's 100% spot on, man. What did you think of Deadpool in this movie, man?
The MCU hasn't really dealt with anti-heroes in the way that the previous generations of quote-unquote Marvel movies have, with the Punisher and Paul especially. You could even put Blade into that, although he's definitely coded much more straight heroic in the movies. And yeah, they did sand down the edges. They did Disneyfy Deadpool in this movie. They tried to keep the spirit of the character and allowed him a license that they wouldn't allow many other characters, even the villains in previous films. Drug use, swearing, casual violence. These are things that the MCU has steered clear of, and in my belief, largely rightly. There's always space to explore these things, but when your core property is as big as for children, these are hard themes to weave back in and allow to exist in the same space.
So did you think this movie needed to be R-rated?
I think it needed to be R-rated to give it the scope to be true to what came before it. The MCU, if you like, is a love letter to Marvel Comics, and that is how I view it a lot of the time. This movie is a love letter to that earlier generation of Marvel movies that walked so the MCU could run. And when you're specifically using characters who had that harder edge, who brought R-rated superhero cinema and made it commercially and critically successful, you did need that extra zhuzh that the ultra-violence comes in, where they sanded off an aspect of Deadpool is, apart from a couple of lewd jokes, they totally desexed the movie. Deadpool 1 especially has a lot of explicitly sexual humor. Deadpool 2 less, but there's enough there to carry that lineage, and there is none of that in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, Deadpool 2 is definitely the father figure tonally for this film, especially when you have a character like Wolverine who has 6 giant blades on his hands. Do not see him use them in the most visceral way possible does seem like a bit of a cheat, and we're used to the Hollywoodization of Wolverine. When we saw an X2 in that Berserker rage, I was like, that's all I'm ever going to get. And you know what? When taking it off the comic book panel and onto the screen, I'm fine with that. But now having seen it, it's almost an intrinsic part of that character. I know the other reason too that they needed to make the movie R-rated was because Deadpool's always been R-rated. Wolverine's last film was R-rated. You can't go backwards on those sort of things. That would have been too much Disneyfying. But when I look at the whole overall product that has no nudity, a whole bunch of lewd humor and sex jokes and swearing, it's like, I don't know if it really needed to be R-rated. Yes, there's some wonderful humor of the commando style dressing from Beardo, which the constant groin and butt pats and stuff like that would never make it into a PG-rated film. It's one of those difficult things that, look, I think as long as they can keep that sort of tone going, it works, but there's still so much of it. Like, I would say the majority of it was not R-rated for me. Everybody's level of pearl clutching is different.
They did manage to release a PG-13 version of Deadpool 2, so it isn't without precedent. I don't think I ever bothered to watch it, but it is certainly a thing that exists. And so I don't think toning it down a little bit is the wrong choice with the material, when in theory you're bringing it to an audience that expects to be able to take their kids to these things. And they didn't shy away from a bit of the old ultra-violence, but it was more cartoony than some of the more R-rated violence that we're used to from the Deadpool franchise at this time.
You don't want to have to explain what pegging is to your child. So is that. Can I just say, though, that I think the Human Torch makes the best R-rated character. Johnny would absolutely be a potty mouth. And when I saw that, I was like, that's Johnny Storm. That's Johnny Storm to me. I felt like the gloves had been taken off.
The joy of seeing somebody, even at the end of the movie, when you know it's not Cap, he comes back for that end credit scene where they really dial up the swearing to 11. That's America's ass, but it makes total sense that Johnny Storm would be that. And even that is shocking, is definitely overstating it, but that's kind of the effect that it has.
They were absolutely going for that shock value. Let's get the actor that everyone knows as Captain America to swear like a sailor for an exorbitant length of time, where it was just one of the best post-credit sequences, because also it allows you to go back and watch the entire film again and see Deadpool as not a complete a-hole who framed this guy and threw him under the bus. He's literally just repeating what I think it's in watching it again on the second time. I actually enjoyed those scenes more, especially when he meets all the other cameos, because he wasn't necessarily the bad guy in that situation anymore.
It grounds Deadpool as well as not the only character who talks like this, and honestly makes it more honest. In the real world, particularly juvenile-minded adults are very prone to framing things in crass ways.
I also think the flip side to it is what it takes to be an MCU hero and what defines them and makes them different from all the other franchises. And taking a good hard look at Deadpool and saying, is this character an MCU hero? No, he is not. What do we have to do with him to get him into a place where we could emotionally consider him as part of the MCU more than just an IP acquisition on the part of Disney buying Fox? And I think that, to me, is really what it was about there. And also bringing a Wolverine that would also know what it is to be a Marvel superhero. I keep coming back to that conversation with Happy, as I think the setup for what the movie is about, and this is only really what I got on the second watching, and that is really like the first question he asks him is, what exactly brings you here today? I saw that job interview was literally the producers of the Marvel Universe looking at a character like Deadpool and going, why do you want to be here? Because you can't just be here because we bought you. You got to earn your place. And that to me was one of the sub-themes that the movie was about. So the other thing that Happy says, his second question was, what exactly brings you here today? And I think what was really great is that because Deadpool didn't have a really cogent reason for that, is again one of those things that I brought up in my analysis of Deadpool 1, was that I don't think he has cogent motivation at all. There is no reason for him to get out of bed and do what he does, which we saw happen in this movie. Why are you here is really intrinsic and important to asking the character, what is your motivation? You remember immediately when Tony Stark questions Peter of that, and he says, because when the bad stuff happens, you don't do anything, it's on you. With great power comes great responsibility. All these characters, the MCU characters, have a calling to help. Deadpool,
with great power must come great responsibility. I was recently reading a Dan Slott arc that went to great lengths to remind us that the word must is in there. And I think that's an important word.
It really is. My God, when you put it like that, you're absolutely right. So there's very much also Wade's journey to not just figure out why he does stuff, but also to work well with other people. What do you think about that question, Scott? Do you have an experience as a member of a team?
It's an interesting place because Deadpool's a popular character, and we've seen in this movie does play off other characters really well. He has been put into team books of varying tones. He was put into a version of X-Force that was pretty grim and gritty and designed to reflect the ultra-violence of Deadpool, if not the irreverent tone. And he's also been a member of an Avengers team, fighting alongside Captain America, and has earned the loyalty of Captain America. One of the things you get from a character like Deadpool, who just bounces off everything around him, is that they're very malleable and can fit into all sorts of different shapes and different situations very easily. And so with that lineage behind me, it doesn't strike me as out of place for Deadpool to want a team, to want to be part of something greater for him than himself. I don't think Wade Wilson is irredeemable as a character. I don't think Wade Wilson is incompatible with noble instincts and goals. Even from how we met Wade in Deadpool 1, he was working pro bono to discourage a stalker from harassing a teenage girl. He has always wanted to find a larger place for himself, despite what he's done. And that's a commonality he has with Wolverine, and why they can pair so well, even though they are wildly divergent characters.
I think finding the chemistry that makes the two of them work together to show, hey, can these toys play together, is really interesting and really fun. And that there is a point where, holy cow, this is the angriest Wolverine that I've ever seen in my life, because I feel like Wade's being generally pretty reasonable.
Apart from the educated wish.
He didn't know that it was an educated wish up till that point when he fights him in the middle of the desert. It's just like, Wolverine, you're ready to straight up murderize a dude that you don't know has a healing factor just because he annoys you. The third question that Happy asks him is, why do you want to be an Avenger? And he's just like, they're the best of the best. I need to turn things around with my girl. And I don't want to spend my life being an annoying one-trick pony, which I thought was just way levels of self-aware. What do you think of that question if it was posed to the other Avengers, Scott?
Black Widow has red in her ledger and wants to try to wipe it out. Cap is Cap. He's constitutionally incapable of not getting in between a bully and their victim. Thor wrestles with the weight of responsibility that leadership and in particular royalty brings. Guy's good with a bow and arrow. The Hulk wants to be seen as something more than a monster. It's a question that we have had answered for the Avengers, and therefore it's a question that is important that any prospective Avenger is able to answer.
It's also one of the questions that I think the Marvel superheroes really suffer. Doctor Strange, Chi, Captain Marvel. These are all characters that I don't think have much greater motivation than Deadpool does. And one of the things that I love is the examination that if you do not have Deadpool in a monthly book with stuff happening to him constantly that he needs to take action for, he really does, in his own words, flame out. He hangs up the costume. He doesn't know what to do with himself if he's not actually given something to do as Deadpool. It's interesting that he didn't continue being a merc. Like, he wasn't interested in killing people anymore. And that left him listless and burned out. And then one of the things that Vanessa says to him is that you took a knee and you never got back up. He never found his purpose. And so I guess my question to you is, if any of these other characters lost their powers, I feel that they would still have purpose in their life. They would just go about doing it in a different way. Is that something you feel would be accurate? What would Spidey do if he lost his powers?
He would find a way to help as a scientist, as a member of a community. It's easier to repurpose yourself for some people than others. And particularly for Deadpool, who at the end of Deadpool 2 had forsworn senseless killing and presumably therefore killing for profit. It's a longer road to hoe to find your place in the world when you don't have any connection to it other than through that lens. The advantage that Spidey has over Deadpool is Aunt May. And even if the only thing he had to do was go out and work a job for pay to keep them in their apartment in Queens, he'd do that without hesitation. And that in itself is its own form of heroism. A character like Wade Wilson doesn't have that default to fall back on, particularly if he's become estranged with Vanessa. I completely empathize with his loss of direction and how that can leave you floundering and unsure of which direction to go. And whether you like broad shoulders or a nice smile or a sense of humor, the most attractive quality in a man to most women is confidence, and he had none.
He completely lost who he was. And there's that line where she says, show me you care about something bigger than you are. And on one level, you're like, damn, partners always trying to change us. But I think she's actually all great partners trying to make him a better person, because he did take this giant step forward to be like, I'm going to apply to be an Avenger. And he gets a massive knockback from that. He applies to be an X-Man and gets knocked back from that also. And after those two things, he finds himself absolutely rudderless and lost. And that is when he literally starts spiraling down, just does not know what to do. And she stays with him through the majority of that. And when she's saying, I need you to show me that you care about something bigger than you, that is also the call of all superheroes. They all care about something bigger than themselves. When I was in trouble, you came and helped me. When that boy was in trouble, you helped him. And without these things to galvanize him, Paul just spins until he's just completely lost, until he just finally stops and ends up becoming a car salesman. At that point, Vanessa's just, you've completely forgotten who you are And to your point, completely lost all confidence in everything that I knew that I loved, that I fell in love with. Yes, I fell in love with the Hitman. He's the one, I get the impression that he's the one that chose not to keep being a hitman. So it's not something that she put on him. But then when he's not doing that, what to do with himself?
The ultimate problem of middle age, wrestling with the death of dreams and the encroaching mundanity of reality. And for a film whose target audience really is middle-aged fanboys, I think it's an important theme to explore.
Because a lot of us get paralyzed by taking the perfect step forward. And I think that's what Wade wanted to do. I'm going to be a hero, so I'm going to move to another multiverse. I think that's what happened. Did he time jump to the 616 from 10,005? He's got to have used Cable's time machine to jump across to the 616 universe, which I think is garbage. The comics are the 616 universe. I don't care what you call it, Kevin. It's not the 616 universe. How do you feel about that, Scott?
I absolutely agree. 616 was taken, well populated and established. But on the other hand, that was a nice little pop that comic fans were able to get when they called the MCU 616. And look, they can fight it out. We can have comics that refute the MCU's place as the most important universe in the multiverse, and the MCU can justifiably take potshots back. Despite its lesser legacy, I think at this point, its cultural reach is at least comparable
to the 80-year history of Marvel Comics. Look, if you gotta take the same number, I think of them as 616A and 616B. The Y is the comics that came first, and B is the movies that came second.
Really, I hate to burst your bubble, but there already is a 616 beta.
Of course there is. Then some other nomenclature that we can use to divide these universes up. We can have 616 Armadillo and 616 Giraffe. There we go. That's their new official designations. You heard it here first.
I imagine every universe wants to think that they're the main universe, and that's really what's being fought over, rather than some random numbering system assigned by the Captain Britain Corps in the early 80s.
Is that where the numbers come from?
Yeah, it was introduced by Alan Moore in his Captain Britain run.
Oh my God, Alan Moore, of course he did. So one of the things in Logan is that the universe is 17315. And this very much says that universe doesn't exist. That universe is actually 10,005. That 2029 future where Logan dies in is actually this universe. So lives in a universe where Paul is wondering, hey, where's everybody in the X Mansion? Because Professor X killed them with a psychic attack is apparently what happened if you put these two universes together. And that would make Colossus one of the surviving X-Men of that universe, right? Am I correct in this? These two universes become one?
Quite possibly, but the problem with pursuing that line of thought is that here in 2024, there's a Wolverine who's alive, who's a very important thing, and isn't the worst Wolverine in history, who Wade could presumably have gone and recruited rather than traveling through the multiverse to find the worst one.
Wait, what? Which Wolverine is alive? Oh, you mean the current Wolverine is alive and kicking?
The Deadpool and Wolverine universe is the same as the Logan universe, and this is before he died, so he could have borrowed this Wolverine.
No, but he can't, because the idea is that once that being dies, the universe loses its purpose and so then starts dying anyway. So by bringing in another Logan gives the universe a new anchor character. And yes, at this moment, there will be two Wolverines in that X universe. One that's probably gone off with Professor X and another one, the angriest Wolverine in the multiverse, who's now Deadpool's friend. Doesn't that mean that once the anchor being has died, unless a new one is generated, that universe would eventually just disappear? Paradox is given the task to babysit this universe until it naturally decays in, let's say, 10,000 years' time. But every universe would naturally die that way, which means there must be an extraordinary use of resources, as B-15 is assigning people to look after every single multiverse and babysit it for 10,000 years. That's your job. Just babysit this universe. I feel like that could be, you could be given multiple that time to look after. This is again where I peel the layers back on this sort of fiction. I hate time travel in stories. I think it breaks every single story. I'm not a big fan of all the multiversal stuff that they kept adding and trying to pad Kang out with. And this to me just doesn't make any sense either. All you need to do is stop the Time Ripper. Every universe, as soon as it loses its anchor character, dies in 10,000 years. That's just a fact.
And all they've achieved by the end of the movie is delaying this inevitable. Because presumably this Wolverine, if he's the new anchor character, will die at some point.
This universe will then only live the number of years longer than Wolverine lives, past the Wolverine who died in Logan.
But if this Wolverine doesn't develop adamantium poisoning, then this Wolverine is potentially canonically immortal.
That is true, because you've mentioned that a Wolverine will last until the death of the universe in the past.
Yeah, that's one of the extrapolations that has come out recently. I want to say in somewhere along the way in Hickman's X-Men run.
That's quite fun. So basically, as long as you have a Wolverine in your universe, you're going to last forever. So that basically means the core 6 giraffe universe is going to die because they don't have a Wolverine yet. They need to get a Wolverine, or they're going to die in 10,000 years.
No. It's never established that Wolverine is always the anchor being for a universe, just that there is one.
And that specific universe requires a Wolverine.
God forbid we have an anchor being on one of the billions of planets out there somewhere else in the universe.
I got super confused about Logan the first time that I saw this movie. I was like, what did he do exactly? So some humans came and then he wasn't there and they killed everyone and he was off getting drunk and then he came back, saw everything that happened and then killed everybody. And then now like tarnished the reputation of the X-Men. What happened? That's a big flaw of the movie. I didn't know what Wolverine did.
He went off and got pissed, and when he stumbled home drunk, the Sentinels or somebody had attacked and killed everybody. So he came home to find them dead, and he wasn't there because he didn't commit to being part of them because he was too cool and look after himself rather than be a part of this family. It's not like Old Man Logan where he actually did the killing.
I thought that was going to be the thing for a time, that he'd somehow been implicated in the killing of all of the X-Men or a whole bunch of...
Particularly once we got the Pym Falls set up.
Which is in Old Man Logan. There's a lot of cameos in this movie. And one of the tough things is putting a whole bunch of them in, and I think doing a really good job for 99% of them. I want to post you an idea, and I don't even know if it's feasible. But the only cameo that I didn't feel made a final connection with Wolverine was Colossus. I feel like the big guy would have given Wolverine a hug at the end of that movie.
I got the feeling that they couldn't get the guy who did the voice to come in because I don't think he had a speaking line.
He did. Remember, it's like, what have you been doing all this time? Watching the British Bake Off.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Colossus, do you think he would have, should have, could have given Wolverine a hug at the end of that? Would he know? He would know Wolverine, wouldn't he?
They came from different universes. He wasn't one of the named X-Men that this Wolverine was grieving, although the mindscape that the villain we haven't yet talked about at all, Cassandra Nova, explored with him was a long line of markers. So you have to assume that it represents a goodly number of the mutants that we're familiar with. It also might have been too hard for him.
Going back to Happy's things, I really feel that those are the 3 questions that this movie tries to ask of Deadpool and tries to resolve. And that is, what brings you here? Can you play well with others? And why do you do this? And I really feel that those 3 questions are very much what this movie tries to answer. And it's Happy that sets all this stuff up. And I feel it answers them to varying degrees, because it's one of those things that it's like, Deadpool says in the movie that he doesn't know how to save people. It's like, I shoot people. That was my job. I don't know how to save people. Saved his girlfriend. He saved Fire Fist. Could it have gone better? Maybe. Well enough for Cable trap himself in our reality to honor Deadpool's choices. I don't think that was exactly a failure on either of those outings. Maybe he should have put that on his resume.
Wade doesn't know how he saves people in the way that most people don't know how they save people. The impact we have on our friends and our family is disproportionate to the impact we think we have in a lot of cases. Some people think they have more, some people think they have less. It's all a melange of experiences and memories that make narrative sense in real life. But what we saw through Deadpool 1 and 2 was him endlessly saving people. A teenage girl from a stalker, Vanessa from whatever depredation she had to put up with in her life before they met, Fire Fist most explicitly, and all of the children that would have been abused in the Essex Home for Wayward Children. Just by trying to make the right choices, we do impact other people. And even when we don't see it, and sometimes especially when we don't see it.
One of the things that I pointed out is that in the past, I don't think there are a lot of superheroes in the Marvel universe. I think there's a lot of super soldiers. And Paul is absolutely a super soldier. He fits in right next to a character like Bucky, who I don't think has any more or less ability, like Black Widow, way above Hawkeye. It's okay, everybody is way above Hawkeye. And learning what it is to save people, and him having that dependence on Wolverine, and Wolverine realizing that this guy has a genuine need and is contriving gold to go through any and all pain and danger to try and save his friends, eventually makes its way through to Logan. I don't think it's wonderful arcs in this movie. Like, you're not going to see it listed as right up there as the highest pieces of cinema with a capital C, but it's there.
No, I think this movie is exactly what Martin Scorsese was talking about, despite the fact that I really enjoyed it. I really get where he's coming from with something like this, which is just a roller coaster ride to thrill you in, and I think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think Mr. Scorsese was necessarily entirely dismissive of things as a genre. He just pointed out that traditionally cinema with that capital C you mentioned is concerned with greater things and truer things than making jokes about people who like to wear tights.
Or whether this toy can play well with all the other toys, or whether this toy has the same attributes as all the other toys. Don't get me wrong, the comic books are my life. It's what I do and I love them. But I also understand when very much a term that you've used is IP management. And there is a ton of IP management in this film. It is good IP management, and it is perhaps a cynical way to look at the characterization that they've done in this film. But on the other hand, I think it's a very accurate way to look at the characterization that they've done in this film of especially Wade, and to a lesser extent, Wolverine, of bringing them into the Marvel Universe and giving them this sort of side pocket part of the MCU, because all things being told, they are not in the MCU yet. They've brushed adjacent to it, but they're still back in their own. And is it a way of saying, oh, Fox are going to reboot the 10,005 universe? That was probably one of the other things that really got me. This movie somehow managed to sidestep so many of the questions that we had about what the future of the MCU is going to look like now that Fox is here. Did you feel that?
I actually really respected how they didn't try to set an agenda for the MCU going forward. I think it's one of the reasons Quantumania didn't work, especially Quantumania. They were more concerned with charting a course for the future than making this moment fun for the audience who paid their money and sat in those cinema seats. I think it's necessary to be cynical about corporations like Disney trying to manage IP and legacy franchises so that modern consumers will still continue to buy plays and DVDs and rent things and watch them on streaming, even though in canon, we've now brushed all this aside and are about to reboot it all. The Fantastic Four, I think, is coming next year. The Chris Evans Fantastic Four is no longer important. And it is explicitly trying to make those still tangential and a part of what will continue forward. But I think that you can also flip the cynicism and give them credit for appreciating that these things do exist, do have fans, and do deserve to continue to exist in our memories and in our hearts. Very little of the MCU is perfect, but because it's canon for this ongoing project, it has more cultural value going forward than the parts they're about to jettison. And trying to keep those parts alive and keep those parts remembered and given a degree of importance in the ongoing milieu, it respects the hard work of the creators who tried to bring the Fantastic Four to life the first time, brought the X-Men to life the first time.
Roger Corman was the one who tried to bring them to life the first time.
Yeah, I was going to ignore the Corman Fantastic Four and the two previous Captain America iterations. People of our age still have affection for the Bill Bixby Hulks.
I do wonder if in the graveyard there is a shot of a Thor helmet. I do wonder if that is the Thor helmet from Return of the Incredible Hulk with the wings on the side. Very close.
It's either that or from Adventures in Babysitting or A Night on the Town. It was released in two different names. That was the first cinematic Thor we ever saw.
If that is a Fox film, that's absolutely what it is, because NBC own Return of the Incredible Hulk. So you might be onto something there. And it's absolutely most cynical. If we look at it as a spectrum, at the absolute bottom, the most cynical part of the spectrum is IP management of these characters. In the middle is a corporation looking at this, at each of these characters and ideas, and acknowledging that, yes, there are fans that genuinely care about it. And I honestly believe that there are tons of people within this corporation that genuinely love the material themselves and are infused with that love into it. And a lot of those people I feel got to work on this movie.
Kevin Feige was an associate producer on the original X-Men. That's where he first met Hugh Jackman during audition to play Wolverine in the first place. No matter his thoughts on the final product and what they got right and what they got wrong, I guarantee you that the guy in charge of the MCU right now has a genuine affection for all of this material.
And I think that really does filter down. You know, he's tried to do something a little bit different in the last phase, and it's worked in some cases and not worked in others. You and I have mainly complained about just a glut of material, all the Disney Plus shows, a plethora of rudderless characters, very much like the struggle that Deadpool deals with in this movie. And I do want to see that if the MCU can get back to heroes who have clear, definable goals, that each one of those heroes can sit down with Happy Hogan's job interview and Avengers interview and answer each of those questions. Because I don't believe Shang-Chi could answer those questions. I don't believe Doctor Strange could answer those questions, nor Captain Marvel. Maybe Captain Marvel after.
I actually think that the arc you're praising in this movie for Deadpool is the exact arc that Doctor Strange was trying to get across. Somebody who had been completely self-obsessed, trying to learn and figure out how to care about more than himself.
And here's my thing with both of these movies. I get that a lot of people would think that Doctor Strange is a ton of fun. I absolutely get it. I think it is visually one of the most stunning things that I've ever seen on screen. I get too that a lot of people would find Deadpool and Wolverine a lot of fun. I think for completely different reasons, it's some of the most stunning stuff that I've seen on screen in superhero cinema. Both those movies, I don't know if either of them land their character arcs. I don't know if Deadpool has truly hit the point of that character arc. The only reason why I rate this higher than Doctor Strange is I really feel that when you are bringing out a character for the first time, you need to solve a whole bunch of the problems with that character and the challenges that character presents. And I have gone on record saying that I believe that Deadpool 1 does that and then some. I get to the end of this movie. I don't feel like Deadpool has completely changed. Yes, maybe he's learned to work better with others. Maybe he's realized that his driving impetus is to protect the people around him, but I felt he knew that anyway. What did he learn to save people? To just never give up? While his body can take the punishment, his mind can't. But at no point does he give up despite the enormous amount of pain that Wolverine puts him through. Maybe that's his arc. Whereas I felt the Doctor Strange, the same at the start, the same at the end.
I think there's an element of that in this movie too. We're talking about Deadpool learning to be a hero and care about more than himself. But in the end, does he? Because he defines his world in a photograph of 9 people. And that's what he's trying to save because they matter to him. He doesn't actually care about the 9 billion people that make up the world around those 9 people, and never demonstrates any real affection for them, or at least consideration or empathy for them. It is just about, I want these people in my life, therefore I'm trying to save my world. And he does define his world as very small. Devil's advocate, my own devil's advocacy. Most people's lives are very small. And any empathy we have for the wider world comes from the connections and empathy we have for those around us who represent the rest of that world. It's very hard to give too much of a about some random person on the other side of the world whose life you will never know anything about and whose existence you have no means of confirming. We generally come to valuing that through recognizing that everybody around us has at least as much value as we do.
And that is the journey that Tony Stark goes on in the Avengers. He sacrifices himself, not for the rest of the members of the team, not for Pep, who I think has left New York at the time. There is nobody in that city that Stark directly knows, and yet he still flies that nuke up into the hole. If the TVA had taken those 9 people out of that multiverse, 10,005, and Deadpool had still gone into the room and sacrificed himself, then that would have been heroism. It's still heroism wanting to save his friends. It absolutely is. But I think that would have been Avengers level of heroism to then still go in there to be like, my friends are safe, but I'm still going to do this. I remember at the time saying, oh my God, he's sacrificing himself. But again, he only does that because his universe still needs a Wolverine. That's why he does it. He gives his life for his friends, which is amazing. But again, I don't think that's Avengers level. That is not Tony Stark level of sacrifice that he learned. I don't know if he got there in the end. And that's one of my big problems with the movie. I think the arcs in this movie are very wibbly wobbly. Tons of fun, but I don't think they quite stuck the landing for me.
And yeah, maybe they didn't. Generally, most audiences are invested in enjoying whatever they're watching. They've taken time out of their lives. They've paid money. And there is an immense amount of goodwill that comes for anything that you are setting aside time to watch, paying to watch. You want to enjoy it. That's the whole reason you're there. So you're incentivized to enjoy any particular piece of media you put time into. And that's why I usually like to rewatch things before I cast judgment and rank them on tier lists and things like that. Because I was certainly incentivized to really enjoy this movie. It was charming and charismatic. God's perfect idiot and the world's most handsome man are in this movie on screen for almost the entire goddamn thing. That is an enormous amount of personal charisma. You add in a script that's smart and funny. That is a propulsive emotional force that really requires some distance and some repeat engagement with the material to properly understand. I'm impressed with both of us getting this deep into the weeds on something that's new to us.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you hanging out. And we'll see you next time. We're going to go through and do a scene-by-scene deep dive breakdown into Deadpool and Wolverine. We hope to see you there. There are two reasons why me, a comic book writer and artist, has partnered with Notes and Clips, a stationery company. One, they make great stuff. And two, Rob, the panel's Destiny 2 guru, is the co-founder and fulfillment officer for Notes and Clips. So if you're looking for a present for yourself or for someone else that is actually made by an honest-to-traveler Destiny 2 gamer, then look no further than Notes and Clips, my fellow Guardian. Notes and Clips are a small family fire team designing, selecting, sourcing, and most importantly, personally handcrafting fantastic stationery, organizational stickers, and pens. Notes and Clips is just the perfect present for anyone you know, like buying someone an exotic engram, IRL. Let me show you their awesome stuff. You've got these awesome stickers that are so much fun for someone younger, while these stickers are perfect for someone just trying to survive being an adult, or maybe who's getting married. I honestly believe that all big events should be planned for with these planner journals and these stickers. That way you'll not only have the amazing memory of the event, but you'll have a beautiful journey to remember it by. And these stationery boxes are perfect for birthdays, end of year holidays, or just plain saying thank you on Mother's Day, Father's Day, or heck, even for that fire team leader that watched you flail against a wall for 40 minutes on Whisper of the Worm. Thank you, Rob. Notes and Clips have almost 30,000 missions under their belt and around 6,000 reviews that would make even Cade 6 blush. Rob will get your order and will personally transmit it to you. How soon depends on what you ordered and where it's going. Here's the breakdown from this side. Buy someone you know something nice and know that you're supporting a fellow Destiny 2 player and their family at the same time. I don't care how many times Rob holds me through Volta Glass trying to get me Vex Mythoclast. I still don't have it, Rob. I am an artist, and I have a rep, and I'll put it all on the line and say the quality is so flat out incredible that Ada's Loom will be jealous. Meanwhile, the price is quite frankly a steal. And if you use the code Badower25, you'll get the largest current site-wide discount. That is Rob's and my shout out to a fellow Guardian. Notes and Clips are your go-to gamer present for non-gamers, like a stealth gamer present. But you'll know, I'll know, but they won't. Thank you, Rob, and Notes and Clips for all your support.
I've seen film critics I respect who aren't necessarily huge superhero nuts also really enjoy it. I think it's going to be a divisive movie in the best way, in that some people will bounce off it and some people will absolutely love it, but it's not going to get pulled into a culture war. That said, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of dumb takes on both sides, and which is why we should burn social media to the ground. Anyway, click and subscribe.
Oh man, thank you so much for hanging out and making it here. I hate to ask more of you, but hitting that like button would help me and my little baby channel here out immensely. If you want to hear more of our stuff, including our massive scene-by-scene breakdown of Deadpool and Wolverine, please hit that subscribe button. If you want to check out my stuff, I'm so proud of Joker Harley Criminal Sanity at your local comic book store or on Amazon.com, where it has some very nice reviews. Scott and I will also be streaming on twitch.tv/Jason Badower. And if you want some of my prints, find me at a convention on jasonbadower.com or exclusive prints available only on my Patreon on patreon.com/Jason Badower. In the meantime, there is a whole bunch of other videos for you to check out. I have an entire MCU playlist as well as The Road to Deadpool, which is an analysis of all the good Wolverine movies and the two Deadpool movies leading up to Deadpool and Wolverine. If you're into video games, there is a ton of video game analysis there also. Hope to see you next time.